evening and welcome to Pune International Center. I am Abhay Vaidya, Director PIC. This is our fifth lecture in the series, India and the World's Great Religions, curated by our members, Dr. Latika Padgaonkar and Professor Pradeep Apte. India has been acknowledged as the cradle of great religions, and over the millennia, a number of religions and religious movements have taken birth in India, flourished and spread out to influence other parts of the world. This lecture series seeks to underscore the plurality of the Indian ethos. We've had lectures on Buddhism, Jainism, Christianity, and Islam. And today we are honored to have with us Mr. Elijah Jacob, former Executive Director, American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee for India. He will be speaking to us on Judaism and Jews in India. Chairing today's session is Dr. Latika Padgaonkar, member PIC. Dr. Padgaonkar has been a journalist, columnist, editor, and translator, and was the National Information Officer at UNESCO New Delhi. This program has a Q&A segment, and you are welcome to post your questions in the question box. May I now request Dr. Padgaonkar to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Elijah Jacob, and initiate the proceedings. Latika, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Abhay. A very, very warm welcome to you, Mr. Elijah Jacob, and to all the PIC members and other friends who have joined today's meeting. Shalom. We're very, very happy to have you with us to speak about Judaism. I was asked to introduce you, so I would like to just say a few words. You have given us a very detailed idea about the kind of work you have done and the career you've had. Let me cull from there some of the most important points, the way I see it. That you have been, as was just said, the Executive Director of the American Joint Distribution Committee, I'm supposing this is the India chapter, and the Strategic Advisor to the Overseas Country Director for the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee. Its parent body is in New York. You, Mr. Elijah Jacob, you are born in a Jewish family in Mumbai. Your grandfather was the cantor. For those who don't know what is a cantor, well, a cantor is someone who sings liturgical music and he leads prayers in a synagogue. So he was the cantor in Mumbai's Gate of Mercy Synagogue. This is the oldest synagogue in the city, and it was established way back in 1796. Mr. Jacob has helped to implement the Joint Distribution Committee's many programs, including setting up homes for the elderly and a Meal on Wheels program, or Meals on Wheels program, or a project rather, again for the elderly. He's a winner of innumerable awards, fellowships. He's a member of many trusts and the president and vice president of several different organizations. He's also conducted many, many leadership activities. He speaks several languages, Hindi, Marathi, English, of course, and has a working knowledge not just of Gujarati, but of Hebrew as well. But surprisingly, his educational background was different. He has a BSc with distinction in chemical technology from the University of Mumbai. Later, he obtained a postgraduate certificate in management, the management of NGOs and of non-profit organizations from the Golda Meir Training Institute in Haifa, Israel. He was also for many years the editor of Impact, a Jewish youth group newsletter, and also of Jewish Landmarks of India. Actually, he did a lot of compiling and editing for Jewish Landmarks of India, and this is something we'd be very happy to learn about, Mr. Jacob. What were and are the major Jewish landmarks here? Given your close associations with both national and international organizations, your involvement with the Jewish community, and your knowledge about the history of Judaism, I believe you're in an excellent position to talk to us about your faith. So I request you now to take the floor. Toda.
Thank you, Dr. Latika, for your kind introduction. And I would like to say that it's an honor for me to address you and the members of the Pune International Center. I had also requested some of my friends also wanted to join in, not just the Jewish friends, but also non-Jewish friends from the earlier companies that I worked with Pfizer Limited and with Marico Industries. And many of them have joined in as well today. So I think what I'm going to do is, I'm basically going to give you an overview of Judaism primarily, because most of our members are non-Jewish. So I will kind of give you an overview of what Judaism is really, some of the salient points and events that mark and are significant in the Jewish religion. And I will also take you to how the Jews came about to be in India, how they came from where they came, and a little basic history of global Jewry. So that is going to be my talk. And I'd request Amrish to maybe just highlight the first slide on highlights. This is Judaism, and I'll talk a little bit about all the paraphernalia that you see here. And we'll go on to the next slide, and I want to kind of highlight and talk to you about what I'm going to cover as a part of today's presentation. I will be speaking a little bit about the history of how Judaism came about, some of the significant and major tenets of Judaism, which includes the 10 Commandments. I'll talk a little bit about Shabbat, which I think is one of the biggest contributions that Judaism has made to the world today. Talk a little bit about our temple, or what we call the synagogue. I'll show you a few of the insides of the temple. I've taken a few photographs, which will be shown to you through the PowerPoint presentation. I'll also deal a little bit about the fundamentals and some dietary laws that we need to follow. I'll talk a little bit about some of our festivals, and many of them have some commonalities with other religions, including Hinduism. Then I'll talk a little bit about Judaism today, how are we spread, how many Jews in the globe. And I'll finally come down to talking about Jews in India, how they came about to be here, and what have been some of the major contributions of the Jews in India. So that's going to be my presentation, about 40 minutes. And I hope you will enjoy it. So we'll start with the first slide, the third slide after this, please. Okay. Just to give you a background about the history of Judaism. Judaism is a religion, philosophy, and a way of life of the Jewish people, originating in the Hebrew Bible, which is also known as Torah. It is considered by Jews to be the expression of the covenantal relationship that God developed with the children of Israel. Judaism claims to be a historical continuity spanning more than 3,000 years. It is one of the oldest monoistic religions and the oldest to survive into the present day. Abraham is hailed to be the first Jew and the father of the Jewish people. As a reward for his act of faith in one God, he was promised that Isaac, his second son, would inherit the land of Israel. Then it was called as Canaan. Later, Isaac's son, Jacob, and his children, 12 sons, or the 12 tribes, as they are said, that dispersed during conflict and formed the diaspora of Jews, were enslaved in Egypt. And then God commanded Prophet Moses to lead the exodus from Egypt. And during this exodus at Mount Sinai, they received the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, which is considered to be the backbone of Judaism. These 5 books of Moses, together with the writings of the later prophets and the Psalms, comprise of the entire written Torah, which is available today to us and which is followed by the Jewish people. Eventually, it is believed that God led them into the land of Israel after their slavery in Egypt. Let's go to the next slide. Who is a Jew, really? According to traditional Jewish law, a Jew is anyone who is born of a Jewish mother or converted to Judaism in accordance with Jewish law. All mainstream forms of Judaism today are open to sincere converts, although conversion has traditionally been discouraged since the time of the Talmud, or the time when we got the written law. The conversion process is evaluated by an authority, and the convert is examined on his or her sincerity and the knowledge that they have taken up on why they are interested in Judaism. We'll go on to the next slide, which is the 10 Commandments, which forms the basis, as I said, the basis of our religion. In fact, there have been a number of movies connected with Judaism, and there was a wonderful movie on the 10 Commandments. And these are the 10 Commandments that I have put together. The first 4 commandments concern the relationship between God and man or humans, while the next 6 commandments concern the relationship between man or between the people themselves. But all these commandments reflect God's will as regards to human behavior and aims to regulate them. So the first one is, I will just read out the exact commandment. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. So the concept of one God or monotheism is very much evident in the first commandment. This commandment is to be aware that the God of Israel exists and influences all events in the world. It requires the acknowledgement of a single God to the exclusion of any additional deities. The second commandment, and we'll go back to the slide, and it basically says, do not make an image or any likeness of what is in the heavens above. So this commandment basically prohibits the construction or fashioning of idols in the likeness of created things, whether they are in the form of beasts, fish, birds, people, and worshiping them. So Judaism does not believe in idol worship. It also prohibits making an image of the God of Israel for use in worship, like it was in one of our histories. A golden calf was erected by the Jewish people when they were in Exodus outside in the desert, and Prophet Moses was not there, so they were led astray, and they made a golden calf as an image of God, which was very much disliked by Moses when he came down, and he actually smashed the first tablets of 10 Commandments on seeing this golden calf. The third commandment, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. It does mean to say that do not swear falsely by the name of the Lord. This is a prohibition against making false oaths in the name of God, specifically those which are pointless or insincere. And the fourth commandment, again, which is a commandment between God and the people, is remember the Shabbat day and keep it holy. I'll talk a little more about what the Shabbat is. The seventh day of the week is termed as Shabbat, meaning to cease in the Hebrew language. And it is a holy day, just as God ceased creative activity during the creation. We believe that God created all the sky, the seas, the birds, the flowers, the trees, the animals, and finally God created man and woman in 6 days, and then he rested on the 7th day. So the 7th day is considered to be holy, and this day is celebrated in Judaism by having 3 festive meals, wine, and engaging in Torah study and pleasurable activity. To keep this day distinct and a day of rest, Jews abstain from productive activity on the Shabbat, including travel. We will talk a little bit more about the Shabbat in the next slide, but I'll go to the 5th one, which now the remaining 6 commandments are basically commandments between people, between man and man, man and woman, woman and woman as well. The 5th commandment is honor thy father and thy mother. Now, this commandment, as you know, it basically is an obligation to honor one's parents and that one owes their existence or birth to. The next commandment is thou shalt not kill, do not murder. Murdering a human being is a capital sin and is totally prohibited. The next one is thou shalt not commit adultery. Adultery is defined as sexual relations between a man and a married woman who is not his wife. So we are prohibited from committing adultery. The next one is thou shalt not steal, which is self-explanatory. Do not steal. The 9th commandment is thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. One must not bring a false testimony in a court of law or other proceedings against a neighbor or any other third person. And the last of the 10 commandments is thou shalt not covet. And here it is said one is forbidden to desire and plan how one may obtain that which God has given to another. So whether it is one's property, somebody else's property, somebody else's wife, somebody else's cattle at that time, or somebody else's possessions, which are rightfully not yours, should not be coveted falsely by the person. So these are basically the 10 commandments that we are supposed to follow and live our life so that they kind of give us a sense of direction and purpose. We'll go on to the next slide, which is Shabbat. And Shabbat, I think, is one of the major contributions that the Jews have given to the world, a day of rest. And in Judaism, it starts on Friday evening and ends on Saturday evening. And what you see in this slide is there are 2 candle stands. We light 2 candles to observe and to respect the Shabbat. It's, as I mentioned, is a day of rest after the 6 days of creation. And we have wine, which is something which kind of lightens the heart. We have a special bread prepared on that day called challah. And the Jews are kind of requested to do Torah study and to have prayers. So usually in our synagogues or in our temples, as they are known, we are required to pray, and we do have many of our communal services on Friday evenings to welcome the Shabbat, and on Saturday mornings when the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, are read, and it goes on till the evening when we have Havdalah prayers, which is like the break, like keeping the Shabbat exclusively. And as we said, there is no work to be done, avoided, and to make that day special. So this day, and I think this is one of the major contributions, significant contributions that the Judaism has given to the world. You take a day of rest in your weekly, like a weekly off. It could be a Sunday, it could be any weekday, to rejuvenate, to renew, to rewind, and to, look on to the next week with great vigor and hope. Where you will be able to kind of do things which don't necessarily you do on a regular daily routine. So that's something that, one sec, I think, that's something that I think the Judaism has given to the world. And I think it's one of the major significant contributions which has helped the world to be what it is today by giving a proper day of rest. And I think it happens in all religions. I think amongst the Christians, it's a Sunday, which is the day of rest, like they have a holiday. Amongst the Muslims, it's a Friday. And I think the whole calendar that we have and like how we develop the day of rest is more or less based on this concept of Shabbat. We'll go to the next slide, which is some of the teachings and dietary laws that we have in Judaism. According to this rabbinic traditions, there are 613 commandments directed to specific groups. Jewish ethics are guided by oral traditions and central Jewish virtues. Jewish ethical practice is typically understood to be marked by values such as justice, truth, peace, loving kindness, chesed, charity, compassion, humility, and self-respect. Specific Jewish ethical practices include the practices of tzedakah or charity, refraining from negative speech, lashon hara, and most importantly, monotheism. Dietary laws, in addition, are known as kashrut, which we Jews have to follow diligently, and food is to be kept and eaten in accordance with them and is termed as kosher. So, which involves a whole lot of practices, like the slaughtering process is intended to be quick and relatively painless to the animal that is being slaughtered. Judaism also prohibits the consumption of meat and milk. In obedience to God, will saying that you should not cook a kid in its mother's milk. And I think these basically dietary laws help us in improving our health, reducing cruelty to animals, and preserving the products based on the biblical injunction of not eating a kid in its mother's milk. Example, meat and milk together. The Torah does not give specific reasons for most of these laws of kashrut. However, a number of explanations have been offered, including maintaining ritual purity, teaching impulse control, encouraging distinctness of the Jewish community. So basically, these are the laws and teachings through which we have to abide and keep in conjunction with what is expected. Again, these have been given to us by the later rabbis and prophets who came in after Prophet Moses. We'll go on to the next slide, which is a synagogue. And as I said, a synagogue is a place of worship, like how you have temples, mosques, churches. Our place of worship is called a synagogue. And literally, there are these, a synagogue literally means a house of assembly of the Jews. I will show you in the next slide. There are 3 synagogues, and it has a large hall for prayer, which is the main sanctuary. Then there is a Torah ark, which you see on the first, the red colored compartment, which you see right in front of you, stores the scriptures or the Torah, the books of Moses, in the form of a Torah scrolls are stored in there. And that's called the compartment for housing the sacred scrolls. And a desk and a platform for the rabbi in the center, which you see right at the beginning of the first photograph. for the rabbi to start praying and lead the congregation, and is positioned in such a way that it faces, in India, it faces west, which it actually means it faces Jerusalem, because we are in the east, so we have to keep it facing west. So most of our synagogues are, constructed facing east-west, actually facing west, so that when we pray, we look towards Jerusalem when we are praying. I have a few of these photographs. The first one that you have there is the oldest synagogue, which was built in Cochin in 1596, nearly the 16th century, by the Cochini Jews. The one at the bottom below it is the Knesset Eliyahu Synagogue in Mumbai. And the third one onto your right is the biggest synagogue in Calcutta, is the Magen David Synagogue, built by the Dweks, the Baghdadi Jews. And I'll talk a little bit about the Indian Jews later. But this is how a synagogue looks. Some are magnificent, and some of them are very modest. But it depends on how the community decided to build it. Some were very rich communities, so they built magnificent structures, and some were very basic prayer halls to serve the purpose of holding the congregation and saying prayers. So this is how a synagogue looks from outside. And some of the synagogues that were built in Mumbai, in Pune, in fact, you have two synagogues. One is the Ohel David Synagogue, also known as the Lal Deval, which was built by the Sassoons. And there is the other synagogue built by the Bnei Israels called the Sukkot Shalom Synagogue. So there are two synagogues in Pune. In Mumbai, we have 8 synagogues. In Ahmedabad, there is 1. In Calcutta, there are 3. In Cochin, there are, at the moment, 2 functional synagogues. In New Delhi, there is 1. In the Konkan villages, we have small prayer halls, about 7 or 8, where the Bnei Israels first landed. And I think today, in the emerging new tribes of Jews in Manipur, in Mizoram, and in Andhra Pradesh, also, they have small prayer halls in these different parts of India. We'll go back to the earlier slide, because I'd like to talk about the specialized religious roles that are part of our Jewish religion. There are basically 5 major religious roles. The first one is that of a rabbi or a priest. He or she is the religious teacher or head, and the role is bestowed after an arduous learning program on the codes of Jewish law. The priest or the rabbi is expected to give sermons, counseling, and represent their community. In India, unfortunately, we do not have many rabbis. We have just one rabbi who is in Thane. And we do have some overseas rabbis belonging to the Chabad movement. But our organization, the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, of which I headed it till last year, sent some of our young adults for this rabbinical training course. They came back, they served the local community, but then they went back to Israel. So as of today, we don't really have any practicing Jewish rabbi in India. And that role is taken on by the Chazan, or the cantor, who is also supposed to be a learned person, and he conducts the prayers in the various synagogues on our festivals and important days like Shabbat. The next specialized role that we have is that of a dayan, or a judge. And this judge can be an ordained rabbi with special legal training, and he belongs to a Bet Din, which is a rabbinical court. In Israel, religious courts handle marriage and divorce laws and cases. They undertake conversion and also manage financial disputes in the Jewish community. The third Jewish specialized religious role is that of a mohel or a circumciser. He's an expert in the laws of circumcision and has received training from a previously qualified mohel who performs the brit milah or the circumcision. In the Jewish tradition and customs, it is the male child on the 8th day is circumcised, and this comes in from a covenant that Abraham, the first Jew, had with God. He himself circumcised himself as a sign of a covenantal agreement with God to say that I recognize you as the only God, and this was his way of asking, and then it is followed through by all Jews. So all male children are circumcised on the 8th day of birth, and it's done by this special person called a mohel or a circumciser. The next religious role we have is that of a shoket or a ritual slaughterer. In order for the meat to be koshered, it must be slaughtered by a shoket who's also an expert in the laws of kashrut, the dietary laws that I mentioned, and has been trained by another shoket. In fact, in India, all Jews refrain from having beef. We usually have chicken and mutton, which is basically goats. And because we have lived with our co-religionists and Hindus, we refrain from having beef, though in Israel, beef is consumed by the Jews because there are no restrictions as such. But in honor of we living with our Jewish, our Hindu brethren, in fact, all Jews in India refrain from having or eating beef. And the last religious role that we have is that of a sofer or a scribe. Our Torah scrolls that we have, which are used for prayers, the tefillin or the phylacteries that we wear, the mezuzot that we put scrolls on the doorposts, and also the marriage contract and the gittin or the bills of divorce must be written by a sofer who is an expert in Hebrew calligraphy and has undergone rigorous trainings in the laws of writing sacred texts. So this is basically, these are the major 5 roles, specialized roles that are expected to take place in the Jewish community. And the Jewish community's life cycle events, which I will talk in the next slide, have to be performed by these 5 major religious role players in the community. We'll go to the next slide, which is life cycle events. Life cycle events or rites of passage occur throughout a Jewish person's life to serve and to strengthen his Jewish identity and to bind him and her to the entire community. The first one is the Brit Milah. And that I had mentioned to you is we call the circumcision, the welcoming the male babies into the covenant between God and Abraham and his descendants to the rite of circumcision on or after the 8th day of life, followed by a naming ceremony. So usually, after the circumcision ceremony, and that's called the Brit Milah. The next life cycle event is the Bar or Bat Mitzvah. The literal translation of this means Bar Mitzvah means the son of the commandment, and Bat Mitzvah means the daughter of the commandment. This passage from childhood to adulthood takes place when a female Jew is attained the age of 12 years and a male Jew has attained the age of 13 years. They become responsible for themselves under Jewish law and are obligated to observe the commandments and are expected to participate in all areas of Jewish community life. The next life cycle event is marriage. Marriage is an extremely important life cycle event, and like all other religions, a wedding takes place in the Jewish religions under a kuppah, or a canopy, which symbolizes a happy house and the signing of a marriage contract or ketubah. At the end of the ceremony, the groom breaks a glass with his foot, symbolizing the continuous mourning for the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. The bride and the groom fast on the wedding day, for both souls must be forgiven for all their mistakes before they merge into a new complete soul. The next life cycle event, death and mourning. Judaism has a multi-staged mourning practice. Reincarnation is said to take place for 3 reasons, and we believe in reincarnation. One is to correct the past life, to elevate the soul to a higher spiritual level, and to be a leader, guide, and teacher for other people. So that is primarily why Jews believe in reincarnation, and there is specific customs and traditions connected with death and to be given importance. In the next slide, I want you all to see 2 life cycle events. The one on the top, on the left-hand side, is the bar mitzvah of my son, where he's reading from the Torah, and we have his tutor next to him, and he's actually being trained to read that portion of the Torah in Hebrew on his bar mitzvah day, which usually happens to be on a Shabbat day on Saturday morning. That's when we do. And what you see in front there is the Torah scroll from where he has been reading the Torah. And the picture at the bottom is that of a Jewish wedding, where you see, and the paper that you see the bride and the groom are holding is the ketubah, the marriage contract, which is written by a scribe in Hebrew and in English behind. And it's basically a marriage contract between the wife and the groom and the obligations to each other. And this is usually, the weddings are solemnized in our synagogues. So I just thought I'd share these 2 pictures to show you a couple of life cycle events that we have in our Jewish customs and traditions. We'll go to the next slide. Let me talk a little bit about the Jewish festivals. The Jewish festivals are also known as high holidays or days of awe, and they revolve around judgment and forgiveness. The first one, which is Rosh Hashanah, we celebrated this just last month on the 6th and 7th of September, and it was the New Year. Our New Year is 5782, so it's been there, like we talk, right from the time of creation, when God created the world. So we take it from there. So our year is 5782, which we celebrated last month in September. Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. Jews are commanded to look into this. It's not something which is joyous, but it's more like we are expected to introspect and look into ourselves and make amendment for the sins committed. It also marks, it's a joyous this, and you'll see we usually celebrate it by having apples dipped in honey. The Jews also make a very special sweet dish called halwa, which is made from wheat germ flour, and they add sugar, condiments, milk, and usually the Bnei Israels use coconut milk, extract milk from the coconut and add to it. It's a delicacy which I think all of you should be tasting, and hopefully if you have a Jewish neighbor, you should go and visit him during New Year, so you'd be able to taste the special halwa that is made in Jewish homes to mark the Jewish New Year. After 10 days of the Jewish New Year is the Day of Atonement, and it is called Yom Kippur. And precedent to Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the custom includes blowing of the shofar, which you see on the right-hand side, the ram's horn, and eating apple and honey, as I mentioned to you during New Year. The shofar is usually blown as a symbolic gesture during the biblical times to remind us that it is a special time of the year for us to atone for our sins and ask for forgiveness. There are also other pilgrim festivals that we call, and the other one that we have is Passover or Pesach. These are landmark events in Jewish history, such as the Exodus from Egypt and the giving of the Torah, and sometimes mark the change of seasons and transitions in the agricultural cycle. The special bread that you see that we eat on Pesach or Passover, which is on the right-hand side below, is called matzah. It's a week-long holiday that commemorates the Exodus or the exile from Egypt. The customs include the Seder or ceremonial evening meal, having various dishes symbolizing the hardships of the Israelites during their bondage in Egypt, and eating matzah or unleavened bread. Then we have two other major harvest festivals, Shavuot, which basically commemorates the giving of the 10 commandments to Prophet Moses on Mount Sinai, and Sukkot, which is also an agricultural festival and marks the harvest season of of Judaism. The next slide, we will talk a little bit about the Festival of Lights, Hanukkah, which is very similar to what we have here in Diwali. This Hanukkah is an 8-day holiday observed by kindling of lights. On each day of the festival, we add a new light. So we start with one and go on adding till the 8th day an extra light every day. It commemorates the miracle of light. There was only enough oil to fuel the eternal flame in the temple on account of the Roman infiltration of the Second Temple in the ancient temple for one day, but miraculously it burned for 8 days. This is not mentioned in the Bible, but has become popular in recent times. And we have this 8-day festival, as we call Hanukkah, and it falls around December and sometimes coincides even with the festival, the Christian festival of Christmas. The other pilgrim festivals, as I said, were Sukkot and Shavuot. So these are, this festival reminds you of Diwali. So for us, Hanukkah is the Jewish Diwali, and it's very visible and widely celebrated in modern times. We'll go to the next slide. Let me talk to you about Judaism today. The world Jewish population today is estimated at 15.2 million, or roughly 0.2% of the total world population. About 45.3% of all Jews reside in Israel. About 42% reside in the United States and Canada, and the remainder mostly live in Europe, former Soviet Union, Africa, Asia, Australia, and the Far East countries. In India today, we believe we are about approximately 5,000 in number only. And the largest Jewish religious movements are the Orthodox Judaism, Conservative Judaism, and Reform Judaism. A major source of difference between these groups is their approach to Jewish law or halakha. Orthodox Judaism maintains that the Torah and Jewish law are divine in origin, eternal and unalterable, and that they should be strictly followed. While the Conservative and Reform Judaism are more liberal, with the Conservative Judaism while the Conservative Judaism generally promoting a more traditional interpretation of the Jewish requirements rather than the Reform Judaism. A typical Reform position is that Jewish law should be viewed as a set of general guidelines rather than a set of restrictions and obligations whose observance is required of all Jews. So there are these basic distinctions between Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform Jews. but it's very diffused. And to whichever stream you belong, you are still considered to be Jewish. We'll go on to the next slide. Let me talk to you about Jews in the world. And I want to mention a very important part of Jewish history called the Holocaust, which is basically, it refers to the genocide of approximately 6 million Jews, European Jews, who were killed during World War II, a program of systematic state-sponsored extermination by the Nazi Germany. Again, there are three distinct Jews, and they are categorized based on the origin from where they came. So we have the Ashkenazi Jews, who primarily came in from Germany and also from former Soviet Union, from the European countries under Soviet rule, now many of them. So these are the Ashkenazi Jews. Then we have the Sephardic Jews, in fact, the ones that are, the Jews that landed in Cochin, the Cochini Jews, which I'll talk about amongst the Indian Jews. One of them, one of their came from Spain and Portugal during the Spanish Inquisition in 1492. And then you have the Mizrahi Jews, or the Jews from the Middle East and North Africa, or they're called the Baghdadi Jews, as you know. And they came from the Middle East, primarily from Baghdad, but also from some of the Arab countries when there was persecution in these countries. So these three distinct Ashkenazi, Sephardic, and Mizrahi Jews form the total Jews. Besides the Jews who live in Israel, they're called the Sabras, and like they're born and brought up in Israel, and they form the majority of the Jews in the world. The Jews from the United States and Canada primarily came from the Ashkenazi Jews or the Sephardic Jews, and moved on from Europe and from the former Soviet Union into these countries when things were getting difficult for them during World War II. So this is a little bit about the Jews in the world. Now let me come to something closer, how the Jews came to India. And this is a map of India, and I want to mention that the Indian Jews are an ancient community made of the Bene Israels, the Cochini Jews, and the Baghdadi Jews. And I'll talk a little bit about the Bene Israels first, who landed on the west coast, as you see here. The Bene Israel Jews claim descent from the 10 lost tribes of Israel, their ancestors having escaped by sea from the persecution of the Greek warlord Antiochus Epiphanes around 175 BCE. And they landed shipwrecked on the shores of Naugao on the west coast, Konkan coast near Mumbai. They settled in the Konkan villages, adopting the local customs and the native Marathi language. They took to oil pressing as a profession along with agriculture, and due to their observance of Shabbat, they were known as the Shanwar Telis. That is, they did not work and did oil pressing on Shabbat, being the day of rest. So they were known as Shanwar Telis, and many of the other oil pressers in the Konkan villages rested on Monday and were known as Somvar Telis. So there was a distinction between the Jewish oil pressers and the other oil pressers, and the Jewish oil pressers being known as Shanwar Telis. Towards the middle of the 18th century, there was a gradual influx of the Bene Israel Jews into Bombay from the neighboring Konkan villages. This was mainly due to the development of the transport system and the growth of employment opportunities in the army with the advent of British rule and the tolerant religious climate that prevailed in Mumbai. The first Bene Israel synagogue, Shahar HaRahamim, was built in 1796 near Masjid Bandar which is close to the Victoria Terminus, or the CST station as we call it. In fact, my grandfather served as a cantor in this synagogue at the beginning of the 20th century. He was the cantor in this synagogue from I think 1890 to 1920 for 30 years. He served as an honorary cantor of this synagogue. The other group of Jews who settled, a large community of Jews settled on the Malabar coast down south almost 2,000 years ago, with the first Jews arriving in Cranganore in the 1st century AD. The Raja of Cranganore bestowed copper plates to grant these Jews to live and trade in the village of Anjuvanam, where they lived till 1524. This Jewish community moved out after the war with the Moors broke out and settled in the territories ruled by the Raja of Cochin. And they are known as the Malabari Cochin Jews. And they basically came to Cochin as traders. In fact, when they first landed in Cranganore, the Raja of Cranganore asked them what they would be able to contribute. And he was scared that, with these large number of traders coming, they would try and usurp his province. And there's a wonderful story that they said the Jews brought out a glass of milk and poured sugar in it and stirred it. And they said, we Jews will be like this sugar. We'll make the glass of milk that you drink sweeter. So don't be afraid of us. We will add value to your province. And that is how they were accepted in Cochin, the Malabari Jews. And much later, another group of Jews from Spain and Iberia, known as the Pardesi Jews, also moved into Cochin and as traders after the Inquisition in 1942 from Spain, Portugal, and these places. The Cochin Jews are credited to be the pioneers of the Hebrew printing press in India. And the third big community of Jews, who are known as the Baghdadi Jews, they came to India in the late 18th century. These are Jews from Arab countries, primarily from Iraq, fleeing persecution, arriving in India. These Jews hailed from Baghdad in Iraq, Iran, Syria, and Yemen, and were referred to as the Baghdadi Jews. David Sassoon, one of the prominent Baghdadi Jews, fled persecution from Daud Pasha of Baghdad in 1832 and arrived in Bombay as a trader. The Sassoons became the largest mill owners in Bombay by 1920 and owned about 20 cotton and textile mills. They traded in opium, trade, jute, spices, and textiles, and had good relations with the British monarchy and prospered tremendously during the British Raj. They contributed greatly to the development of Mumbai city and built docks, hospitals, educational institutions, libraries, and synagogues in Mumbai and Pune. In fact, I can mention in Pune, David Sassoon, he built the Lal Deval, or the Ohel David Synagogue. He also, I think, built the Sassoon Hospital, and he's also responsible for starting an institution for elderly destitutes called Nivara, which I think many of you who live in Pune may be aware of, which was also built by the Sassoons, amongst all the other developments that he did in Mumbai, where he built the docks, he built the Institute of Science, he built a library, he built 2 synagogues in Mumbai as well, but that has been his major contribution of the Baghdadi Jews. Presently, as per the latest trends in demographics, I think there are today approximately about 5,000 Jews remaining in India. Most of them migrated to Israel after its formation in 1948. Though microscopic as a community, they've made significant contribution to the economic, cultural, and social development of the country, and are proud of their Indian heritage, traditions, and culture. To the credit of the tolerant spirit of India, there has been no persecution and discrimination of anti-Semitism of any kind against the Jews in India. And this is something which I salute India for. We have lived freely and happily as Jews. And I think today we, the Indian Jews, serve as ambassadors of goodwill and peace between India and Israel and promote the good relations that we have between the two countries. So this is in short an overview of Judaism and and the Jews in India. And I would be more than happy to take any questions that you have concerning Judaism. And I would ask Dr. Latika Padgaonkar to go ahead and coordinate the question answer session.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Jacob. That was a very, very comprehensive overview in a very short span of time of a history, a philosophy, a religion, a way of life, your ethics, your festivals, your food, everything in a very compact way. So I'm very happy we were able to get it all together. Now, before I have a few questions myself, but I will definitely start with the Q&A that's given to us. But may I start with one myself and then I'll open it up. I have several, but we will go to the others first. What would you say is the difference, and how will I understand the difference between Hebrews, Jews, and Israelites?
Well, they are basically different terminologies that have been used for the Jews during the various historical periods. So they were called the children of Israel initially, and when they started, then they were known as the Hebrews, and they were like distinguished between the Egyptians. Like during the Exodus, the Egyptians called them the Hebrews, and later on, now during modern term, they're called the Jews, or so we have different terms for them based on the period and how they came down in history. So the terminology has changed from Hebrews to the children of Israel, where they're called the Bene Israel, the children of Israel, and today they are called as Jews, or following the Jewish religion or Judaism, which is a monotheistic religion. So during different periods of Jewish history, the terminology changed. So that's primarily how the Jews evolved, the term Jews evolved, and today they're known as Jews.
Okay, thank you. We have one question from Rosario de Souza, and the question is, what is the significance of the third temple for Judaism now?
Well, it is believed...
Two temples, I suppose you haven't said that two temples were destroyed. Now,
right.
What is the significance of a third temple?
Right. It is believed that the Messiah, we believe we talked about reincarnation and afterlife. It is believed in the Jewish religion that the Messiah will come after the third temple is built. And the first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians. The second temple in 17 BCE was destroyed by the Romans. And what we have now is just the western wall of the temple, which is considered to be the most holiest place for the Jews in Jerusalem, which we call the Wailing Wall. And it is believed that with time and with good deeds and, all the people coming together, no strife between the Jews and the Gentiles, a third temple will be built. And hopefully at that time, it is believed that the Messiah will come, which is a person who will bring, there will be no strife. So it's a harbinger of peace and goodwill for the future of not just the Jews, but of the entire world. So that is why many of the people or the Jewish people desire that a third temple can be built as a part of the Jewish way of life.
Okay, shall we go to the next one? This is a question asked by Nandu Kulkarni. How many people speak Hebrew for day-to-day affairs in the world? How many are Hebrew speaking?
Sorry, I didn't get that again.
Did you hear me?
Go ahead.
How many people today speak Hebrew in the world today?
Well,
Someone is asking. Nandu Kulkarni.
Okay. Yeah, Hebrew is the language of the Bible, of the Jewish people. And in Israel, Hebrew is the main language or the official language. And most Jews, wherever they are, whether they are in Israel or in the diaspora, do understand Hebrew. Like, for instance, I can read Hebrew from the Jewish text, but understanding the meaning of some of the words is a little difficult for me. But I know that in Israel and in many of the countries, people who have taken Hebrew as a second language after maybe English or so are able to speak this. So I would say out of the 15.2 million Jews, I would say at least 15 million Jews would be able to speak, read, or write Hebrew in this world.
Okay. Here's another question from Rekha Joshi. She would like to know why people of other religions are not allowed entry into the synagogue.
Are not allowed to? Sorry?
Were you able to hear that?
No.
Enter a synagogue.
No, I think that
she would like to know why people of other religions can.
There is no restriction for other members of the synagogue, other members or other religious members to enter a synagogue. In fact, for my wedding, I had non-Jewish guests from Pfizer that I worked with. My wife worked for IDBI. My marriage was solemnized in a synagogue, and I had over 800 non-Jewish people attending the wedding ceremony. There is no restriction for for non-Jews entering a synagogue. Only, I think, because of the present situation, security threats and things like that, now the Jewish synagogues are, kind of restricted. But if you know somebody, like for instance in Mumbai, we have these heritage tours of South Mumbai, and they do visit the Knesset Eliyahu synagogue after taking due permission. So there is no restriction for non-Jews visiting a synagogue or entering a synagogue. But because of security reasons, maybe you may have not been allowed to enter the synagogue because of the present situation.
Okay. There's Mr. Prabhakar Khole, and he's asking two questions. One is, did you know the late Daniel Elijah Benjamin, into brackets Gadkar, from Pune?
Yes.
Daniel Elijah Benjamin from Pune.
Yes, I did.
Did you know him? He's asking. Okay. And the same person, Prabhakar Khole, asking you another question. Could you please repeat the contact, email, phone number, etc., and so on? So I don't know exactly how you will answer that one, but maybe you could type it and give it later. Could you please repeat the contact, email, or phone? I'm not quite sure what the rest of it is. No slide. I don't know.
Okay. I'm going to slide, the last slide that I have. If you have any questions, feel free to either write to me on my email, elijahjacob@hotmail.com. And I've also given you my mobile number, so you can contact me at any of these two sites.
Rosario D'Souza would like to know which is the holiest place for Jews. Now that the third temple is not there, is it? So what is today the holiest place for the Jews?
Well, today the synagogues have kind of become like the holy places for the Jews the world over. However, the holiest site is the Western Wall, as I mentioned to you. That is in Jerusalem. It's called the Wailing Wall. That is the holiest site for the Jews all over. So most, if you see, most Jews go, when they visit Israel, they must visit the Wailing Wall and pray there. So that is the holiest site at the moment. And hopefully, when the third temple is constructed, that would be the holiest site, which we hope will happen in our lifetime.
Rekha Joshi is asking whether she was not allowed into the Lal Dev. She was not allowed into the Red Synagogue.
Well, I mentioned there is no restriction, but because of security reasons,
Okay.
I think there was some issue. I think there was a bomb blast at the Lal Deval a few years ago. So security has been tightened there. But what I would suggest, if you'd like to visit the synagogue, you can go there either on a Friday evening when Jews go to pray for Shabbat, or Saturday mornings. And you will see the synagogue is open and you can peep in and you can say that you've just come here. And if they don't see anything suspicious in you, you're most welcome to attend or visit the synagogue on these days. So Friday evening, the synagogue is open for services, and also Saturday mornings, being Shabbat in Pune. So try and go there, and if you have issues, you can maybe contact the caretaker and he will be happy to help you to enter. And if you still have a problem, you can call me and I will speak to the main trustee of Ohel David Synagogue, the Lal Deval, and see that you go there with proper appointment, prior appointment, and you'll be able to visit the synagogue.
I think we've lost Latika because of the bandwidth issue, sir. But she will connect with us soon.
Okay.
And just one question I would like to take up is again from Ms. Rekha Joshi. She wants to know why are Jews very orthodox?
Well, most of the Indian Jews are Orthodox, as I said, but we have two other streams, the conservative and Reform Jews. Since I would say in India, rather than being Orthodox, I think most Jews are very traditional because they've carried on what they learned from their forefathers orally down the ages, down the generations. And they followed it very strictly and have remained. And I think one of the reasons for them being Orthodox is that it has also strengthened their Jewish identity, being so far away from Israel, the main center of Judaism. So I think that could be one of those reasons.
Yes, I'm sorry I lost connection for a little while. There's just a little comment from Jonathan Mabgaonkar saying that Daniel Gadkar had a younger brother called Shelim. So that was. Now, I would like to ask you this following question. I have 3-4 questions. I don't know if we have enough time. We'll just give ourselves 5 minutes. Mr. Jacob, what exactly was the territory of the Promised Land? After all, Abraham was brought to the Promised Land from Mesopotamia, correct?
Yes, he came. It was during the biblical time. It was called the land of Canaan, which was today.
Yes.
It includes the whole of Israel plus Jordan and a little bit of Egypt.
Yes.
So it was called the land of Canaan. But I think because of the various conquests, I mean, there were lots of battles fought for this piece of land. And we had, as I said, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Ottoman Empire, the British, the Dutch, all came in. And then because at the end, just before Israel got its independence, British were ruling over this territory. And they divided it into the land for the Jews and the land for the Palestinians. And after the 1967 war, further demarcations were done. And then later on, Israel gave off the territories. And today, also, I think we have the West Bank and the Gaza Strip for the Palestinians, and they can have their free hold on it. And the territory, the land of Israel, has been reduced to what it is today. And I think Israel is really wanting peace with its neighbors, and I hope it will happen. And I think it's important that everybody realizes in that small piece of land that we call Israel today, there is a lot of contention amongst different groups. But if you actually see, there is so much of land available in the Arab countries, and the Palestinians can be easily rehabilitated in each of these countries if it is required. But I think the main bone of contention is they want that piece of land where the Jews are. So that is creating a lot of enmity and strife in that disputed area in Israel. I just hope good sense prevails and we'll be able to have lasting peace between Israel and the Palestinians and the Arab countries, which is happening today. I mean, I see a lot of efforts towards promoting peace between Israel and the Arab countries. And I'm sure if everybody comes and
Holocaust, if we have 5 minutes more, you did mention the Holocaust, but you did not mention, can you hear me?
Yes.
Zionism, which is also something that started at the end of the 19th century, and it is a very big moment for the return of the Jews and the idea of a homeland.
Right, absolutely. So, I mean, especially after World War II, when we found that many of the Jews were not only persecuted, many of them were trying to escape and couldn't find refuge in safe places. And even when the British were ruling this place, they denied landing permits to many of the fleeing Jews from Germany and former Soviet Union. So this sense of having a homeland for themselves came around that time. And today, Israel is like the home for Jews, whether you are from any part of the world. And the right to return to your homeland is one of the fundamental rights for every Jew, whether you're in America, you're in India, or you're in Israel, or you're in any part of the diaspora.
Okay, I think we have more or less come to the end. Is that correct, Abhay? I will. I had to go for other questions, which I will not pose as questions, but I'll just ask one, not a question, and it's not original. It is something I have come across in my reading, which is that in Judaism, is the idea of God transcendental? That is a God who is beyond perception and outside of and independent of the universe? Or is it immanent, which means a God who exists within us and within the universe? That's just one, but you don't need to answer it, because I'd rather you answer Rosario de Souza's question, which is, what do the Jews consider about Jesus Christ? So that is her question, so I'm putting that to you.
Right. I mean, as we said, we have no graven images. We are not even allowed. I mean, we have prophets. We consider Jesus Christ to be one of the prophets. He was born a Jew and he died as a Jew. And we believe that he was one of the prophets. But like, we don't consider him to be God or son of God, as the Christians or the Christianity aim it. He is one of the prophets whom we felt worked miracles and things like that. And he is considered to be like a prophet, like any other prophet in Judaism, whether it's Prophet Moses, Isaiah, or the other prophets. So that has been the major distinction between Judaism and Christianity.
Okay. So here I think, Abhay, should we come to the conclusion, come to the end of this? Because it was a fairly comprehensive overview for those who don't know what kosher is and who don't know what, how someone here can learn calligraphy or, talk about Passover and Yom Kippur and, so many different things that he mentioned. It was a very, very comprehensive and very as easily understandable as one can get in the short span of time that you had, Mr. Jacob. And thank you for telling us about the Shanvar Telis and the Somvar Telis. I didn't know that Teli was literal in the sense of that they were really oil pressers. Thank you also for talking to us about the Jews in India. We had in those days, we had on Main Street, today called MG Road, the Pune Hosiery and the Imperial Hosiery, which were really big shops, important shops, landmark shops. They've all gone. So one last question is, when Jews were so well settled here, they were philanthropic, they did so much for the community here, how did they start leaving to go to Israel, to go to a country which they might call their home, but a country they have never known.
Right. I mean, look, everybody has an inner desire to be close to their people. And I think the whole idea of the love, like as I would say, while India is my motherland, Israel is like my fatherland. And I would like, my son is presently in Israel. So I do go and visit him, and I have many relatives in Israel. And ultimately, it's a personal decision one has to take. Wherever you feel you are comfortable or things you can stay, there's no compulsion. And I think many of the Jews who left to Israel wanted to return back to the homeland, the prophecy of collecting all the Jews from the Galut, the diaspora, and going back to your homeland. So I think that sense of spirit and of Zionism and getting back into your homeland, I think addresses most of the exodus, as I call it, from different countries into Israel.
Okay. There is just a couple of questions, but one from Satish Devdhar, and he says, my memory serves me right. My sister used to go to the Lal. They were for elocution competitions. I'm sure non-Jews were allowed to enter the David Sassoon synagogue. That's what he says. He also says, from the religious perspective, how do Jews view charging of interest? I understand that Jews could charge interest to loans to non-Jews, but mostly Abrahamic religions were not allowed to charge interest. Could the Roman disdain come from the fact that Jews charged interest to others, but not amongst themselves? So that was one question. I think we should make it the last.
Yes, last. Yeah.
Right. I think, yes, as per this, I think many of the Jews in the European countries were money lenders, and they charged interest because that was the main occupation for them. And I think even today, when many of us want to kind of see our money grow or something, and I think if it's a question of subsistence and livelihood, charging interest on something that you give when somebody needs money in a situation, I think it's a kind of a banking. I think the Jews were pioneers in banking, so and putting money out on interest and things. And even today, the banking system does have the interest quotient. So I think the Jews were the pioneers of banking in a way, and I don't see it as this. I mean, it's left to you to decide whether you want to borrow money and you want to pay a little more. Because it has helped you in your times of distress, and now you're repaying it back to the person with a little bit of profit.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Jacob, for your extremely your illuminating and interesting talk. I would just like to end by saying that for people who are interested in the subject, and particularly why interest was charged and why Jews over the centuries have undertaken the kind of professions they have, a nice way of doing it would be to see a lovely Hollywood film called Fiddler on the Roof, an old film which talks about shtetls where Jews lived in small communities in Eastern Europe. It's a very wonderful film, and that will give you some idea about the roots of why the Jews have undertaken the professions, gone into certain fields, and why they have endured the way they have. Thank you very much for your talk, Mr. Jacob.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. And if you have any questions, you have my email and my mobile number. I'll be more than happy to answer them. So thank you for giving this opportunity to share Judaism. And I purposely made it very simple because I know I'll be addressing many non-Jewish people who want to know more about Judaism. So I think I made it very simple and kind of plain so that it could be understood and comprehensible for the majority of the participants. Thank you for giving me this wonderful opportunity.
I should tell you, Mr. Jacob, that this was a truly fascinating and illuminating presentation. And there has been much appreciation from our listeners, from our viewers, and the questions kept pouring in. And you explained the key concepts and practices of your faith very patiently. and this has definitely enriched our understanding of Judaism. And the pictures were so telling that you shared in your presentation, and indeed this has been one of the best presentations under this series on world religions by the Pune International Center. And your references to the Ohel David Synagogue, which we know as the Lal Deval here, the Sassoon Hospital and Nivara, did touch a chord because these are iconic structures in Pune. And Latika, thank you very much for chairing this session, for curating this session, and for moderating the question and answers, and for this very interesting discussion that we had, led by you with the various questions. And finally, a big thanks to our participants and to our backend support from my colleague Amresh, who handled the presentation and the technical support, and Kiran, who did all the coordination. So I would like to thank everyone for this wonderful event. And just before closing, I would like to mention that our next event is on October 13th at 5 p.m. And this is a discussion on the book Economist Gandhi by Dr. Jaitirth Rao. And in conversation with him would be Mr. Kiran Karnik, author and former president of NASSCOM. With this, I would like to thank everyone once again. Thank you, Mr. Jacob. Thank you, Latika. And have a pleasant evening. Thank you very much, sir.
It is my pleasure and honor. Thank you.